Good
Good
afternoon,
afternoon,
ma'am.
ma'am.
A
A
very
very
warm
warm
welcome
welcome
to everyone
to everyone
present over
present
here.
over here.
Respected
Respected
guest
guest
speaker,
speaker,
Preeti
Preeti
Patkar,
Patkar,
respected
respected
director,
director,
Madam
Madam
Dr. Mary
Mary
Pandya,
Pandya,
faculties of
faculties
the
of the
college,
college,
and all
and
the
all the
viewers.
viewers.
I
I
welcome you
welcome you all
on our
on our
e-platform
e-platform
of
of
Faculty of
Faculty of
Law,
Law,
JLS
JLS
University.
University.
We
We
will
will
now
now
begin with
begin with the
शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तु ते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तु ते शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरु
a
a
rather
rather
wonderful
wonderful
day
day
to
to
have an
have an
opportunity
opportunity.
to learn from an expert. I am Vishwajit Vadir, and it is an honor to host this event along with my co-host Zainab Sayed. And we, on behalf of the Gender Law Clinic, welcome everyone to this webinar organized by the Faculty of Law, JLS University. The proposition for today's webinar is Eradication of Trafficking in Persons, Miles to Go. In 2013, the United Nations General Assembly adopted resolution and designated July 30 as the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. The agenda of organizing this event is to spread awareness regarding the human trafficking in persons for the purposes of sexual exploitation, which is becoming an increasingly prevalent issue globally. For this purpose, we would like to take this opportunity to welcome and introduce a humble yet prominent personality on our official virtual platform. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Mayuri Pandya, our director and convener of Gender Law Clinic, Faculty of Law, JLS University, for the welcome address.
Thank you. On behalf of GLS Law, Faculty of Law, GLS University, it is indeed my pride and privilege to welcome Ms. Preeti Patkar, the founder and the executive secretary of Prerna Anti-Human Trafficking NGO. Ma'am, we heartily welcome you. This is the e-platform of Faculty of Law, GLS University, and would like to appraise you about our different clinics that our students are working very hard with different activities. And one of the initiative is the Gender Law Clinic. And this is under the auspices of the Gender Law Clinic. Today, this event has been organized, and we are thankful to you that you have, even though you are out of country, you have accepted our invitation and you are with us today. Anti trafficking, this 30th July is announced by the United Nations as the Anti-Trafficking Day. And as every year, the United Nations has the different themes. And when the theme was that the victims' voice can lead the way. So this year's the theme is the victim's voice can lead the way. So we thought that if this is the theme, then the Prerna is one of the renowned NGO in the country. How can so we are very much fortunate that you have accepted our invitation, because uh, when we talk for the anti human trafficking, it's a crusade. It's a crusade, and I think Prerna NGO has worked a lot, extensive work, is one of the pioneer in this crusade. So, ma'am, I welcome you today and would like to hear more from you on the subject. We all are the law students, and though we study the Constitution, we know the Article 23. We know that 2021, even the government of India has given the grants to the almost of all the states for the anti-trafficking sales to establish. But you are the best person to appraise us on the subject. And one more thing would like to share with you. When I saw your biodata, I saw that you are one of the member as the central authority with NALSA. So congratulations for that. And also to all the viewers and all the students, that madam is has she has awarded the Nari Shakti award. So today, a true Nari Shakti is with us, and I congratulate Dr. Suja Nair, Navnita, Ishani, Shruti, all the team members and all the students who are working very hard at the General Law Clinic. I congratulate all of them, and on behalf of everyone, I welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your welcome address. It is my honor and privilege to introduce the speaker for the day, Ms. Preeti Patkar, who is the founder and the executive secretary of Prerna, which is an anti-trafficking NGO located in Mumbai. Preeti ma'am, fondly known as Preeti Tai. In the year 1986, she, along with her husband, Professor Praveen Patkar, began their work along with Nirmala Niketan College of Social Work in Kamatipura, the then largest red light area of Asia. It was there that Prerna was born to break this cycle of exploitation and intergenerational trafficking. Prerna works to protect and actual women and child victims of human trafficking and other forms of violence. She is accredited with several path-breaking social interventions for the protection and dignity of children and women victims of human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. She is recipient of numerous awards from the state government and other institutions of repute. Preeti Madam has 7 books and several research reports to her name. Now I request Miss Preeti to share her words of wisdom.
Oh God, you make me nervous when you say share the words of wisdom. But thank you very much, Zainab and Vishwajit, for the introduction. I also want to thank Miss Mazumdar for reaching out to me and inviting me on behalf of your university and the clinic. Dr. Pandya and Dr. Suja Nair for also for inviting me to speak about the situation of human trafficking and also the work undertaken by Prerna to combat human trafficking. I want to thank everybody at the Gender Law Clinic, everybody in the planning committee. Again, I presume Zainab and Vishwajit are part of the planning committee. So thank you so much for coordinating this event and inviting me. And all the students and everybody present here today in this virtual webinar. Thank you so much. And yes, it is so important for us to listen to the voices of the victims, and it's their voices that should actually lead the way. It's not just enough for us to listen to their voices, but we also have to make a very genuine, a very strong attempt to ensure their voices also get translated in our programs, in our policy reforms, in our laws. So I'm so glad that I've been invited to speak at a time when we are upholding the importance of listening to the voices of the victims. I was telling Miss Muzumdar that I would spend more time talking about our work. So I actually want to start by a case. This is about almost 11, almost 12-year-old girl who was rescued by the police, and I think this was about, it was during COVID time. It was about 2 years ago. And she was rescued because of the information given by an NGO about the sale of this child for commercial sexual exploitation by one agent to another agent. And this rescue happened before the child was sold. Post the rescue, the child was admitted to a children's home that we run. This is based in Maharashtra, in Navi Mumbai. Once the child was in the shelter facility that we run, we provided psychosocial support to the child, legal assistance to the child, medical care. And as this girl also shared concern about the safety of her other siblings, this too was reported to the child protection competent authority called the Child Welfare Committee, and their safety was also addressed. Why did I pick this particular case? I picked this particular case for today's webinar because not many children are fortunate like this particular child to get rescued before they are sailed. Most of those who are trafficked, and most of whom we have worked with in the last over 3 decades, um, they are trafficked into the sex trade as adolescent girls. Most of them, we worked with have been between the ages of 13, 14 to 16 and 17. We've also seen a lot of young women between the age of 19 and 21 being trafficked and sold into the sex trade. I forgot to tell you another thing, that today's webinar I'll be basically talking about human trafficking for commercial sexual exploitation. We should all remember that the destination crime of human trafficking is not always commercial sexual exploitation. It could be labor trafficking, it could be selling children for adoption, it could be selling children for organ trades, it could be selling human beings as mail ordered brides. Today we are seeing a lot of cases of young girls being trafficked and sold for marriage as well. So the destination crime could be anything, but my focus would be on commercial sexual exploitation. Going back to what I was sharing with you all about the profile of the victims. So I told you all about the age group, and many of these young women and young children are often resold as well, many times from different traffickers to the pimps, and also moved from one destination to another. Here, I would also like to mention that boys and young men are also sold into the sex trade, though there is very little reporting on the same and very little spoken about them as well. Like I said, the destination of trafficked victims could be within India and also to the neighboring countries of the Middle East or Far East, or very recently we've had cases of young girls, young women who are trafficked from India to several African countries as well, and for commercial sexual exploitation. We've also seen cases of young girls and women who are being trafficked in different parts of India from our own neighboring countries. Um, and also from European countries and other Asian countries. I'm just trying to tell you all this because very often we have a lot of myths around, trafficked victims. We create a particular profile about them, and we often see a poor girl from a poor community, from a very rural community. So I think, as law students, it's so important for us not to create stereotypes, and to keep our minds open to the fact that a traffic victim can come from any socioeconomic class and could come from any countries, could also be trafficked from a very well developed and so-called rich country as well. um, in the past, the trend seen was that most of the children were trafficked, like I said, from rural communities to urban locations. But in the last over a decade, the cases that were referred to us were of victims trafficked from urban neighborhood and sold into the sex trade, operating in the same cities as well. In the past, the traffic victims sold into the sex trade found themselves in the brothels of the red light area. So very often, when you talk about sex trade, uh, red light area is so synonymous to the sex trade. But today, that's not the case. The red light areas, it's not just the red light areas where the victims are sold. The brothels are run under the guise of more legitimate businesses like beauty parlors, massage parlors, escort agencies, liquor bars, and other entertainment management agencies as well. So very often when we work with adolescent girls and young women, we tell them that when you read an employment advertisement, just don't get fascinated with the perks that they are sharing on that advertisement. Do check. Sometimes these places are too good to be true, and maybe they are luring young girls through promises of a great pay package. So be cautious, be careful, and we've seen that in our work. In the work that has happened in the last 3 decades addressing anti human trafficking, there are a few areas that I feel are neglected. And as law students, also, I feel, tomorrow, if you do decide to practice and, work with victims, I think, or work on advocacy and policy. I know many of you all get into that sector as well, and that's why I've taken this up. I feel few areas that are neglected are one aspect is like I've spoken, is the need to acknowledge that boys are also being trafficked into the sex trade. um, and I'm saying this only because we have to ensure that the unseen is shown, and the unspoken is spoken about. The second area which is neglected is that traffickers could be anyone. We often think that they are strangers, but that's not true. We always talk about stranger danger, but in almost all the cases that we've worked with, the traffickers have been known to the victims. Uh, they could be anybody and from any socioeconomic class, could be of any gender as well. Okay, so very often the movies tend to show, the social media tends to show a male figure, but it could be anybody. There is no face to a trafficker. They lure young children and adults with false promises, manipulating and exploiting their vulnerabilities. We've had recently two examples in India, very recent two examples, and I'm sure the students sitting here would have already read it in the newspaper. One being of singer Daler Mehndi, where he was recently sentenced to 2 years of jail term for a 15-year-old case of smuggling and human trafficking. And a very, very recent case, I think I read it in the newspapers last week or the week before that, of human trafficking of a very, senior political leader in Meghalaya, where his farmhouse was raided by the police and several minors were found in that farmhouse. So, like I said, the trafficker could be anybody. There is no face to a trafficker. Similarly, the victim could be anybody. The third area which really needs attention is the process of grooming that often takes place before a child or a woman is recruited and then sold into the sex trade. Social media, or especially our cinema, has given us this impression that somebody is trafficked from their house, and the next thing is she's found into the brothel, and then she's raped by the customer. This is not what happens. There's a big process of grooming, and grooming is the process when the trafficker is really trying to lure her and sell her the world that she's either craving for or she gets attracted to. And this phase is often neglected. The fourth and the last part for today's webinar that I'm going to cover is the area which is neglected is the intergenerational trafficking. I'm covering also this because our work started on addressing intergenerational trafficking into the sex trade. Children born to prostituted women being sold into the sex trade in case of girl children, and into the allied activities of the sex trade, and also commercial sexual exploitation, which is being carried out and justified by society in the guise of hereditary and sacred customs or customary practices. The ritualized sexual slavery and the crime on women and children, that we've completely stopped talking about. So very recently the Wire covered a story called God's Wife. It's in some of the villages in Telangana, where young girls by the time they are 5, are routinely dedicated to the village temple and eventually used to used either by the temple priest or sold to the highest bidder. We find a similar kind of ritualized sexual slavery in Maharashtra and Karnataka, called the Devdasi system. And we often like to believe that we have eradicated these kind of ritualized sexual slavery, but very often we feel that we have stopped looking, and it is being carried out by through different through different forms at our back doors. So this is another area which I feel we are in the last over 3 decades we have neglected. I'm going to now move to start talking about our work. So like I was introduced and rightly mentioned, that we started work in the largest red light area in Kamatipura in the year 1986 as a field project of College of Social Work Nirmala Niketan, based in and Kamatipura, of course, is based in Mumbai city. And our intervention was focused in that day and even today to a great extent around the issue of intergenerational trafficking into the sex trade. Here, what we saw was children, little children, were being groomed, and in case of a girl child, by the time she was 12 or 13, to be sold eventually into the sex trade. And in case of a boy child, very few cases we saw in those days. Maybe we didn't see enough. So I'm not saying the cases didn't exist, but maybe we didn't see enough. But what we saw in case of a boy child was children being sold into the allied activities of the sex trade. The young ones who were totally dependent, the infants dependent on their mothers for care, were being mildly intoxicated and put to sleep right below the bed on which the mothers were forced to entertain customers. Other children would run errands for their mothers' customers, and in a few cases, lure clients for their mothers and other children in the brothels. In this world of the sex trade, the customer is the king. So in the evenings, the mothers are expected to devote all their time to the customers. And what we witnessed here was that there was very, 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 very little, very rare to see adult supervision. So you could almost say there was no adult supervision for the children in the night till the last customer left the brothel. We saw a very, very visible cycle of intergenerational trafficking, very often 3 generations in the same brothel, or 3 generations soliciting in the bylanes of these red light areas, especially Kamatipura, with no hope of breaking away. The society, keeping them invisible. So today's topic again, listening to the voices of the victim also goes, we also need to, um, while you can only listen to the voices of the victim if you notice them, right? And when we started work, what we realized was the society was keeping them invisible, because if you see Kamatipura, it's in the heart of affluence. And when I say affluence, it is political affluence, social affluence, economic affluence. So it's not that people did not see them, but they were, very, very, I call it very intentionally kept invisible. And as per today's theme, we saw it even 3 decades ago, that no one cared to hear them. And a society which thought and still thinks, and as law students, this is something that you should also examine when moving forward, if you decide to work on this issue, is that very often we think prostitution is a necessary social evil, so we don't see the commercial sexual exploitation part of it. What we see in front of us is a woman soliciting whom the law calls as a prostitute. And we think that prostitution is a necessary social evil. And what is the harm in the children born to these women, their daughters being recruited to take over the trade from the mother? We do not, and even in those days, we did not find anybody making an attempt to understand what their desires are. And when I say what their desires are, I mean the desires of the mother and the children. And what about their right to life? What about their right to dignity, their aspirations, their right to be able to decide where they want it to be? So when we talk about listening to the voices of the victim, it's so important to give them their right to decide, right? Listening to the voices is all about my choice to speak, my choice to make a decision for myself. What we also saw was that these women and children were socioeconomically marginalized, and what compounded their plight was the stigma, the discrimination, and the social exclusion that they were subjected to just because of being in the sex trade. The children born in these brothels who were included, or inducted into the sex trade and allied activities of the sex trade, their right to dignity and well-being, and their fundamental right to survival, development, protection, participation, all these pillars of rights were being thoroughly violated. And if you see, 1986, when we started work, was the time when children's rights were being discussed. And in 1989, world leaders came together and made a commitment to the world's children by adopting the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. But it was only in and obviously there was no discussion on trafficking of children, and absolutely no discussion on intergenerational and ritualistic sexual slavery that I was talking about earlier. It was only later in 2000 that the optional protocol on the sale of children, child prostitution, and child pornography was signed, and came into effect into 2020, 20, I think 2002. Yeah, this is where our journey of breaking the intergenerational cycle of trafficking into the sex trade began. And we started the first night care center for these children in the red light area, where the mothers could come and drop the children in the evening and come and pick them up the next day morning when they were free, with their last customer having left the brothel. The Night Care Center is a very holistic and comprehensive service which caters to all the basic needs of children, from safety to education to recreation, healthcare, everything. With a very rights based approach, the Night Care Center model has helped us disrupt the intergenerational cycle. Today, I feel very proud to say that we have students who are also law graduates. And yes, we do see children, they're all in school, they are learning, they are safe. Their right to protection is being ensured. And I think what is most important is today we find, when you give this kind of support to children, we find that they enjoy their right to choose their path, and that's so important for us. And I think it's also very relevant to today's theme of the webinar. People to be able to enjoy their right to choose their own path. Our intervention, our other major area of intervention, which many of the law students probably it would interest them a lot, is protecting the rights of the victims, especially children. We've worked with adult women as well, post their rescue from the sex trade, ensuring their human rights are not violated during rescue and post rescue. Through a very comprehensive case management approach, we provide them psychosocial support. We also provide them legal support, supporting them in their rehabilitation, which is very realistic rehabilitation, very important when we talk of rehabilitation, because one part is economic rehabilitation, and if that is not sustainable, we often find victims getting re-trafficked into the exploitative situation from where we rescued them. So also helping them through the process of prosecution, ensuring that voices are heard throughout and their suggestions are incorporated. We also ensure that our interventions are child centric and trauma informed. Through this very holistic model, we also ensure that children are not re-victimized. I think that's so important in our journey, that victims are not re-victimized, not re-traumatized, and not re-trafficked. And I think as law students, very often re-victimization and re-traumatization happens during the trial phase. And I'm sure you all will, when you all are practicing, you all will make a note of how your intervention at any stage, or during the trial phase, no victims are re-victimized and re-traumatized. I also want to say that our strength lies in networking, collaboration, and convergence. So it's not that everything, as an organization we run. Do I have another 5 minutes? Can I continue? Do I have another 5 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So we also have an online resource center. Please visit it. It's called www.fighttrafficking.org. It is, it's a very, very dependable source of information on anti-human trafficking issues. It could be a very good knowledge partner for you, especially for law students, social work professionals, etc. We also work with the government in sharing our on ground practices when laws and policies are formulated and discussed. I just want to take a little bit of time to talk about, what technology has done in making the situation worst for victims. So, technology is welcome, and we've seen the growth of technology really benefiting a lot of people. Has changed the lives of a lot of people, but it has also changed the life of people for the worst. So with growth of technology and use of social media, what we found is the whole grooming, the luring, the deceiving, using of fraudulent means, buying and selling of human beings has moved to the online space. We've started intervening in this space, but believe me, it's so difficult, because getting evidence, to book the perpetrator in the online space is getting very, very difficult, and even to pin down as to who the perpetrator is getting difficult. So, the growth of technology and the online space has become a challenge for a lot of us, working on anti-human trafficking issues. Having said that, I must also say that, with a lot of collective effort, both on the part of the government and the civil society organizations, we have seen some change in the way, human trafficking, anti-human trafficking is being addressed. To a great extent, or to some extent, I shouldn't say great extent, we've managed to break the silence. I'm so happy. I mean, I can't remember 20 years ago, law universities inviting not just me, but anybody to come and speak on human trafficking. And these are my indicators of seeing how we are trying to, collectively trying to break the silence around human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. We also find a marked change in the response from the government. We are seeing a lot of efforts from the government to train functionaries, to train law enforcement, child protection functionaries to understand the law. And more so, what I really appreciate now is in the last over 2 to 3 years, what I'm seeing is the importance of understanding victim friendly procedures. So we are moving from just understanding procedures and understanding, the content of the law, to making it more humane. How is it that we can make it victim friendly? How is it that we can bring in empathy in our intervention? How is it that we can bring in compassion in our intervention? I think that is also very, very important, rather than just seeing, whether mechanically and technically procedures are being followed. It's so important that we, all our interventions are victim centric. So today's theme is all about that. It says that in all our intervention, let's be trauma informed and let's be victim centric. The minute we are victim centric, the first thing that comes to our mind is listen to the voices of the victim, involve them in problem solving, co-create problem solving. Don't think you know it all. They have their suggestions, let's listen to them. I also want to mention here the commendable contribution done by civil society organizations in the area of rescue, protection, rehabilitation, and participation of victims, involving them and ensuring that they are brought on the table where policies are being discussed, that doors are open for the victims and survivors to share their voices and give their suggestions, and really push for their suggestions to be incorporated into the policies. I think there is a good beginning, and together, let's try and strengthen our intervention. I'm going to stop here, and once again thank everybody for inviting me here today. And if you all have any questions, I'm here, I think, for another 20-25 minutes, and happy to try my best to respond to your questions. Thank you so much.
Uh,
I
Thank
think
you,
there are
ma'am.
two
Thank
devices
you.
open together in one room, that's why there is an echo.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, Ms. Zainab, please.
Thank you, madam, for your words of enlightenment, and thank you for providing us with valuable insight in the domain of human trafficking. And with your permission, ma'am, should we start the questions from the viewers?
So do I just read the question and answer?
Yes, ma'am. So the first question is from Dhruvil. Why do victims of trafficking not run away?
Yeah. So very often we feel running away is so easy, right? So let's look at domestic violence. Why is it that women who are married to abusive husband do not run away? It's not easy to run away. We think it's easy, but it's not easy to run away. And the other question, more than asking this question, why do victims of human trafficking not run away? I think we should ask the question, who will accept them if they run away? Where will they go if they run away? I'll give you an example of the first case of a rehabilitation that I was involved in when I was really very young. um, and we were trying to help her because part of rehabilitation is economic rehabilitation. Very, 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 very important. I mean, there are other aspects as well, like the mental health of the victim, other issues, but economic livelihood is so important. And because people knew the work that I'm doing, the first thing they wanted to ask me was, is she from the sex trade, and what about her character? Can you guarantee, okay, please understand my words, can you give us guarantees that she would be a good woman? And I often feel as society we are not prepared to help them at all. So the question should be for us, that if they ran away, how many of us would let them live in peace around us? I told you that there are a few students that we've worked with from these communities who are law graduates today. I'm telling you about a very, not a very old experience, okay? It must be 10 years ago when I went to a college of social work. And just like, today we are doing this virtual session, they had invited me to speak about our work. And there was this one girl who, after the session, came running and hugged me. And the minute she did that, there were five of her colleagues asking her, how is it that you know her? Are you from? And I looked at them and they stopped. So you see how our mindsets are, right? So if they run away, where would they go? And believe me, it's not difficult, and it's not that they are tied in shackles and kept. Okay, don't think they're tied in shackles, and that's why they don't run away. They're not tied in shackles at all. But there is nowhere for them to go. They've made an attempt to go, and they've had to come back into their exploitative situation, because what they found was the person who rescued them, their own clients, was making life help for hell for them post the rescue as well. So it's not so easy. I hope, Dhruvil, could I answer your question? I think we need to create a very, very, victim friendly, a very conducive support system. And the day we create that support system, I'm sure, just the way, we've succeeded with children of prostitutes, we've created that kind of a support system. And today we find every child completes their 10th, their 12th, are, you know, are accessing college education. So that kind of conducive situation, when we've seen that rescue, post rescue, and rehabilitation has been successful. They've not been re-trafficked, but it's not so easy. It's definitely not easy. I want to ask, what
Uh,
are the factors that lead to human trafficking? I think one is vulnerability. So, like I said, do not think it is a problem of poor communities, okay? I think we need to really change our mindset. If we are not seeing girls and women from affluent communities, it's only because we are not seeing enough. And, you know, one is not intervening enough, but we are seeing. So let me give you an example of our own shelter home that we run. About 4 years ago, I think it was about 2 years before the pandemic, we had two girls who were in their 11th standard, had English medium education. The parents were very educated, had a job in a very, very formal, organized sector. And both these girls were groomed by their own boyfriend and sold into the sex trade. So it could be anything. I think human traffickers thrive on vulnerability. They are looking for, it's a marketplace, right? So the buyer is rich, is a middle class person, is a poor person, and every buyer is going to demand different kind of clients for himself. So different kind of in the market
ma'am,
space you call commodity, right? And unfortunately, human beings, when we talk of human trafficking, we are commodifying human beings, and they are looking for commodities in the form of human beings, and they are looking for people from all socioeconomic classes. So I think vulnerability is something that they thrive on. So during the pandemic, right, many families, many children, many individuals were vulnerable. So there are so many people who approach them with promises of amazing job, because economically many people suffered. So we often say that traffickers, any kind of crisis, any kind of vulnerability, crisis like the pandemic, crisis like a tsunami, crisis like a earthquake, become a fishing ground for traffickers. They go and hunt for vulnerable people, vulnerable families, and start the grooming process, and also give them promises of a better life. And that's how the whole process of recruitment begins.
ma'am, there's one other question from Rushi, that is, what can I do if I know someone who has been human trafficked?
Oh God, that's such a lovely question. Thank you for asking. I think, support that victim, believe that victim, believe what that victim is saying. Ensure you tell her or him that it's not their fault, and report. Even if you think you've not met the victim, you think that there is a human trafficking activity likely to take place, or has taken place, or is being, uh, that people are being exploited and they were trafficked and sold into this exploitative situation. Do report, do talk. Today we have many, many places where we can go and report to the police. There are helplines, there is 1098. There is, we have the National Commission for Children. They have their own uh, e-box where you can report to the competent authority. Talk about it. The other is, I hope law students, after this webinar, you all are so active on social media. Do try and dedicate some space of your social media to talk about this issue. But it's so important you report. And if you come in contact with the victim, please support that victim. Support in whatever way you can. Yeah, it's not that we can support everybody through the entire phase. It's okay, at least put her in touch with other people who can support her throughout, but do your bit. Do not don't think that you're going to put yourself in danger. um, I know you have to be cautious. Please be cautious. Talk about it and inform more people, but don't shy away, don't be a bystander, and continue to be involved. How does migration affect the possibility? Oh my God, this is such a good question. How does migration affect the possibility of being trafficked? Yeah. See, when it's distressed migration,
Yes, ma'am. There is this question from Mantra Bhatt, that how does migration affect the possibility of being trafficked? This being in reference to migration of Rohingyas to Bangladesh and trafficking increase in from Bangladesh.
thank you, Mantra. This is a very, very good question. Please remember, not all migration, people end up being trafficked. Whenever there is distressed migration, again, the vulnerability is high, right? When you are migrating because of the distress in your place of origin, and that is the time the traffickers approach you again with promises of a better life. So be it the Rohingyas of, of Bangladesh, anybody, and again, migration, distress migration is a very, very fertile ground for traffickers to approach the victims with promises of a better life. And that's why we say we need to talk about safe migration. See, migration is the right of every individual, right? You, me, anybody. But let's make migration safe. Let's inform people. So we have a program on prevention, and one chapter is on safe migration. We tell adolescent girls and young women that if you're migrating to another country for a better job, what is it you must do? Keep your passport with you. Do not hand over your passport to the agent who's taking you from one country to another. We always say keep people informed, keep your family informed when you're moving. Do not go uninformed. Let your friends know where you're going. Find out who are your true friends, whom you can share this information with. Check whether the person who's facilitating migration is a safe person. Check all information and only then move. So yes, we need to make migration safe, and we need to talk about safe migration. We are not talking enough about safe migration. Mantra, I hope I could respond to your question.
Excuse me, ma'am.
You can't hear me?
Ma'am, yes, we can hear. Ma'am, I would like to ask a question if that's fine.
Sure, sure, sure.
Madam, if you don't mind, can you tell me like your personal experience? I have heard rumors that the like Kamatipura is completely bleak and depressive. So, being a student, what was your first thought? What was the first thing that came to your mind whilst you were on the field
Oh my
research?
God. Oh my God. This is the most difficult question. so, yeah, so Kamatipura is not easy. It's not easy, but it's not difficult either. Um, what came to my mind first, like said, what shook me the most was intergenerational trafficking. What shook me the most was walking in the evenings in the by lanes or entering these brothels and seeing a young girl, around 14, 15, her young mother and her grandmother, and, you know, uh, them realizing they have no choice but to be in the sex trade. What shook me most was when women, when we asked them how is it that we could help their children, and they said, you know इज्जत की जिंदगी चाहिए हमारे बच्चों के लिए. And what shook me was not what they said, but shook me was that the society just did not feel that this particular community deserves izzat, that they deserve dignity. The society that kept blaming women for being in the sex trade. And this is what I want to tell the person who asked me, how can I help? Don't blame them for being in that situation. It's not their fault. And it was so difficult for me, and for all of us in Prerna, to convince people that it's not their fault that they are in the sex trade. It is the fault of the society that did not see what was happening to them. It's the fault of the society that even today we don't see it as a human rights violation. So I think these are things that really shook me, and a lot of things, seeing young children lifeless sleeping. So in those days the red light areas used to be so noisy in the evening. Oh my god. And seeing these young children, sleeping under the bed of their mother, so lifeless. And the community, when I asked them, how can they sleep, how can these children sleep like this in the midst of so much noise, the brothel keeper just chuckling and saying, kuch nahi, thoda sa afu khila denge to so jate hain, सुबह तक नहीं उठेंगे. Such casualness around children's well-being, such casualness around the worst form of violation of children's rights. I think all this shook me a lot, a lot, a lot. What happened? Did we lose contact? I'm not sure.
Ma'am,
Okay, I'm still there. Okay.
uh, thank you so much, ma'am, for your words. And now, as we have limited time, I would like to invite Miss Urvashi Sharma, who is a member of a gender law clinic, for the formal vote of thanks. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your words, kind
Thank
words,
you.
and your information.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very warm greetings to everyone. Well, an event like this cannot happen overnight. The wheels start rolling weeks ago. It requires planning and coordinations for weeks. It is my utmost privilege to offer a vote of thanks for today's magnanimous event. I would like to offer my vote of thanks to Preeti ma'am for having come here on this virtual platform and engaging our student in a rather exceptional webinar. I would also like to thank Dr. Mayuri Pandya, Director, Faculty of Law, GLS University. The constant support from ma'am made this event possible. I would also like to thank teaching and non-teaching staff for their constant support and assistance. And at last, but certainly not the least, I would also like to thank all the students and viewers. Thank you everyone and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Now, ma'am, with your permission, we would like to conclude the session.
Thank you so much. Thank you and all the best. And do stay in touch if there's anything we can do. And do visit our website. Once again, it's fighttrafficking.org. Give us your feedback. We'll be so happy to incorporate more information based on your feedback. Do visit the website. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.